It's back to Britain in the 1980s once again as we head back to the headlines and happenings of 1988. Starting in January, where Margaret Thatcher was celebrating as she became the longest-serving UK Prime Minister of the century, having been in power for 8 years and 244 days. There were celebrations in the UK car industry as well, as the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders revealed that new car sales in Britain in 1987 exceeded 2 million for the first time. The Ford Escort was Britain's best-selling car for the 6th year running. February was a month of industrial action. First of all, nurses throughout the UK went on strike for higher pay and more funding for the National Health Service on the 3rd. Then on the 4th, nearly 7,000 ferry workers went on strike in Britain, paralysing the nation's seaports. The 5th of February saw the first Red Nose Day for comic relief take place, broadcast live on BBC One and led by Rowan Atkinson and Lenny Henry. The event raised £50 million for good causes. Great Britain and Northern Ireland competed at the Winter Olympics in Calgary, but came home empty-handed with no medals. That could be partly explained by our big hope in the ski jump event, Eddie the Eagle Edwards. Into March, and big news in British political party politics. The SDP amalgamated with the Liberal Party to form the Social and Liberal Democratic Party. Its interim leaders were David Steele and Robert McLennan. The merger meant the Liberal Party had ceased to exist after 129 years. March saw a rapid rise in house prices across the UK. It was revealed that the average price of a house in Britain reached £60,000 at the end of 1987, compared to £47,000 in December 1986. The Prince of Wales narrowly avoided death on the ski slopes of Switzerland in an avalanche that killed one of his closest friends. Major Hugh Lindsay, former equerry to the Queen, was sent plunging 400 metres down the mountainside when the avalanche hit the royal party as they were skiing off-piste above the resort of Closters. The 10th of March was your last chance to spend those old Bank of England £1 notes. From the 11th, they ceased to be legal tender and worth no more than scrap paper. Plans were unveiled for Europe's tallest skyscraper to be built at London's Canary Wharf. The office complex was predicted to cost around £3 billion to build and was set to open in 1992. Into April, and golf was in the headlines, and Sandy Lyle became the first British winner of the US Masters. And there was sadness in the world of show business, as Kenneth Williams, star of the Carry On films, died of an overdose of barbiturates at his flat in London. He was 62. April the 5th saw the last episode broadcast of soap opera Crossroads on British television. The soap launched in 1964 and ran for 4,510 episodes, and gave us memorable characters such as Meg Richardson and Benny Hawkins. It was rebooted again a few years later, but has since gone again. The British exam system changed in May, as the first group of 16-year-olds sat their General Certificate of Secondary Education Examinations, or GCSEs as they're better known, replacing both the O-Level and CSE exams. The new qualifications were marked against objective standards rather than relativity. In cricket, Graham Hick set a 20th century county championship record, 6 years before Brian Lara broke it with his 501 not out for Warwickshire. Hick set the record by scoring 405 runs in a single innings against Somerset at Taunton. Celebrity life became more accessible in May as Hello magazine hit the newsagent's shelves. It was launched by Spanish publisher Eduardo Sanchez Junco, owner of the Spanish magazine Hola, and has been following the lives of the rich and famous ever since. The 24th of May saw the Local Government Act come into law, which amongst other legislation abolished dog licences and included the controversial Section 28, preventing local authorities from promoting homosexuality. On that same day, one of Liverpool's most famous landmarks reopened after extensive refurbishment. The city's Albert Dock was reopened by Prince Charles as a leisure and business centre, including the Tate Liverpool Art Museum. Redevelopment started in 1983 and the site was brought back to its former glory, having been derelict since 1972. An episode of Boys from the Black Stuff, filmed there in 1982 before works began, showed the state of disrepair the site was in. The redevelopment included a TV studio, which housed the new ITV programme This Morning, which was transmitted live from the dock every weekday from its opening. 1988 saw Nelson Mandela celebrate his 70th birthday, and a concert in his honour was held at Wembley Stadium. Mandela had been in prison since 1964, and the concert was one of a number of events held during his incarceration, calling for his release and the end of apartheid. Over 80,000 people crammed into Wembley to hear music from Eurythmics, Dire Straits, Simple Minds and Whitney Houston, amongst many others, in what was one of the most memorable music events of the 1980s. June saw 3,500 people evacuated from Poole Town Centre, in the biggest peacetime evacuation in the United Kingdom since World War II. A large fire and explosion engulfed the BDH chemical plant at the town's port. Flames up to 100 metres high and exploding chemical drums were sent into the air. Incredibly, there were only a few minor injuries and no fatalities. And June ended with a different look to the 6 o'clock news on TV. 3 gay rights activists invaded Television Centre and a live news studio, shouting "Stop Section 28" as Sue Lawley was broadcasting live to the nation. The invasion was in response to the introduction of the Local Government Act earlier in the year. Shopping time once again as we hit the halfway point of 1988, where the average wage in the UK was £196 a week. Let's get down to Gateway first, and the man from Del Monte was saying yes to a carton of orange juice for 65p, a tin of hot dogs was 25p, and £2.29 for a bottle of white wine. Bargain. Fancy a short staycation, as they call them today? Well, Pontins were offering mini breaks at one of their 23 super holiday clubs, as they called them, from just £16 per person. Currys were giving away 5 free CDs if you bought the latest Sony hi-fi system for £329.99. And more people were buying their own TVs and video recorders than ever in 1988, rather than renting, and Rumbelows had a sale on. A 20-inch Fidelity set complete with glass front screen, which was very posh back then, for £259.99. Back to the news, and into July, where the news was dominated by a disaster in the North Sea. The Piper Alpha oil rig exploded, resulting in the death of 167 workers. The rig, located around 120 miles off the northeast coast of Aberdeen, was subject to a major gas leak, which ignited, causing a huge blast. Within 3 hours, almost all of the rig had fallen apart and fell into the North Sea. Only a marker buoy remains today, showing the site of the disaster. One of football's big personalities hit the headlines in July, as 21-year-old Paul Gascoigne became the first £2 million player in Britain, as he moved from his native Newcastle United to Spurs. That record was broken again several times before the end of the year. And in politics, Yeovil MP Paddy Ashdown was elected as the first leader of the newly formed Social and Liberal Democratic Party. Into August, and the first child of the Duke and Duchess of York was born. Princess Beatrice was born at Portland Hospital in London. The 22nd of August 1988 will be etched in the memory of pub-goers forever. It was the day that new licensing laws came into force that allowed pubs in England and Wales to stay open all day without having to close. Great for trade, not so great for your liver. September began with the last of the ITV companies taking the night network and providing a 24-hour TV service across the UK. The overnight network featured programmes such as Donahue, America's Top 10 presented by Casey Kasem, and The Hitman and Her, broadcast from nightclubs across the UK and hosted by Pete Waterman and Michaela Strachan. In September, cricket was back in the news as England's tour to India was cancelled after captain Graham Gooch and 7 other players were refused visas because of involvement in South African cricket during the apartheid boycott. And September saw the Summer Olympics take place in Seoul, South Korea. Great Britain came away with 5 gold medals in field hockey, sailing, rowing, shooting and swimming, where Adrian Moorhouse won the 100-metre breaststroke. BBC television presenters Mike Smith and Sarah Green were seriously injured in a helicopter crash in Gloucestershire. Sarah broke both her legs and an arm when the helicopter her partner was piloting smashed into trees close to where he was attempting to land. Smith, who bought the 2-seater craft after learning to fly earlier that year, suffered a broken back and ankle. British actor Roy Kinnear passed away on the 19th of September. He was famous for playing Henry Salt in the 1971 film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. He died following an accident during filming of the 1989 sequel of The Three Musketeers in Spain, aged 54. On October the 20th, English aviator Sheila Scott died at the age of 61. She was the first woman to complete an around-the-world solo flight. She broke over 100 aviation records through her long-distance flight endeavours, which included a 34,000-mile world-and-a-half flight in 1971. On this flight, she became the first person to fly over the North Pole in a small aircraft, and she was also the first European woman to fly solo around the world. Elton John was breaking records in October as well, as he sold out Madison Square Garden in New York City for a record 26th time. Then on the 27th, we were all having a night in, as the movie E.T. was finally released onto home video, and a massive 40 million copies were bought on pre-order alone. There was bad news for rail passengers in October, as British Rail announced a 21% increase in the cost of long-distance season tickets. And as we entered December, Health Minister Edwina Currie provoked outrage by saying most of Britain's egg production was infected with the Salmonella bacteria. The MP for South Derbyshire made her remarks during a television interview, angering farmers, politicians and egg producers. Her comments led to her resignation. December saw some of the year's most tragic events, where on the 12th, 35 people were killed and 100 others injured after 3 trains were involved in a collision during morning rush hour in South London. 2 commuter trains carrying an estimated 1,300 passengers between them collided shortly after 8 AM at Clapham Junction, Europe's busiest railway junction. A third empty train later ran into the wreckage, killing some passengers who had survived the first crash. Then, as Christmas approached, one of the worst air disasters on British soil occurred, as Pan Am Flight 103 exploded over the town of Lockerbie in Scotland due to a terrorist bomb, killing a total of 270 people. Everyone on board the flight and 11 on the ground. The Boeing 747 left London Heathrow at 6 PM, bound for New York's JFK Airport. And finally, as the festive season arrived, Cliff Richard hit the top of the Christmas charts with his single Mistletoe and Wine. It spent 4 weeks at number 1. And that brings 1988 to a close. Thanks once again for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy these videos. You can find the playlist linked to the rest of the episodes in the Britain in the 1980s series in the description section down below. I'll see you again on the next one.